Welcome, everyone. I'm Karen Alter. I'm the CEO of Borshoff, and we are so excited tonight to be hosting the Social Media for Artists panel. It's very exciting for us. We have had a long history with the Arts Council of Indianapolis. One of our former board members, partners was a board member, Eric Johnson, and then I've been a board member for 3 years, and we just love what the Arts Council does for our community, and it's supporting artists throughout Indianapolis. So welcome to Borshoff. A couple of housekeeping things. There are snacks back there. The restrooms are right here around the right-hand side. And I think if you don't know much about Borshoff, we are an advertising, public relations, marketing, brand, digital agency. We've been in business since 1984, just had our 35th anniversary, which we were really excited about. And we're a women-owned business, which is something we've been proud of for all these years. Myra Borshoff was our founding partner. And so we've just kind of carried on her legacy to really help clients make meaningful connections with their audiences, whoever that is. And as we all know, social media now is a primary way that you connect with your audiences and the people that you want to try to reach with your messages or your art or whatever it is. So it's very important. And I think tonight it's going to be really exciting to hear from our panel. So with that, I will pass it on over to the panel. Ashley.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Ashley Lay. I'll be the moderator tonight. So we're just going to go over some stories from the panelists to hear how they work on social media, how they got started, some tactics and techniques, how they utilize the platforms as best as they can and which are their favorite. So we have provided a social media training guide. I'm not sure what your level of expertise in social media is, so the guides kind of have they highlight some great things, just how to start. I'm not doing very well at this. Okay, but the guide is great. It'll tell you what you need to know to get started, but the panelists will also help kind of highlight what is in there in their own stories. There's a note section in the back if you want to take notes and keep track of anything that you hear that you like. So I'm Ashley Lay. I am a senior digital designer here at Borshoff, and I started out at a social media agency, and that's where I got my start in social media. And then I have moved into a volunteer role for AIGA, and I'm the communications director there. So I run a lot of our external communications, including social media. So that's kind of why I'm here to ask them questions, because I kind of know the subject matter, but I'll lean on them to provide their knowledge. Okay, so first we're going to start out, and they're going to explain who they are and what they do and their favorite thing about social media.
Yes. I'm Aaron Scamahorn. On social media, I go by the name Ron Luhorn. It's a combination of my three names, Aaron Lewis Scamahorn, broken apart, put back together. It was a nice effective search terms, because when you Google that, it's really the only thing that comes up. And I do a lot of portraiture illustration, a lot of art and design for beer labels and whiskey labels, and then also do a decent amount of fine art in galleries with a lot of that portraiture as well. And I'm a senior art director here at Borshoff as well.
My name's Mallory Hodgkin. I go by Stabler Cake online. It's kind of a non sequitur. It's, if you Google it, it's the first thing that comes up. But it's also easy to pronounce and easy to spell. So, and I do primarily merchandise design for selling at conventions. Most of the time, they're the fandom kind of conventions, comic conventions, and things like that. So my audience skews a little bit younger most of the time. I'm 32. My audience is typically 10 years younger than me. But I make all kinds of merchandise, patches, stickers, that Spaceballs part where he's talking about all of the Spaceballs merchandise. That's what I do. I guess my favorite thing about social media is it makes me money.
I skipped that question. I apologize.
Do it now.
I love when you're creating something, there's that moment where you're just like, I know I want to just show everybody. And there's that satisfaction of it's finished, and I'm excited about it, and I just want eyes on it. And I think that's the awesome thing about social media, getting those eyes.
My name is Justin Vining. I'm a professional landscape painter here in Indianapolis. I've lived off painting for 8 years. I was fortunate enough to be an early adopter, I suppose, of marketing on social media. So the sweet spot, I call it sort of the heyday of my selling days, was 2007 to 2010. And I was doing most of my selling on Facebook or the lead gen. And then I was actually selling through Etsy. And so by the end of 2010, I had an online following of over 25,000 people through my different social channels, and leveraging that number taught me a lot. And now, 9 years later, seeing how social media has evolved has really, it's changed the way I've looked at all of it, and I've had to evolve through that transition through the years too. So my relationship with social media is kind of long and a little bit unique. I would say my favorite thing about social media is access, and not necessarily the type you would think, but I think networking on social media has become extremely different, and you can use it in creative ways to build relationships with people that beforehand may have been unreachable or untouchable. And I think being really clever with that type of use of social media has really benefited my career.
That's cool. I think one of the subjects in our training guide, we talk about making sure you reach out to people on social media. Is that something that you guys tend to do with your followers? Or
You mean in terms of engagement? Yeah. I think there's that that factor when you're commenting on someone else's art that you really, really admire, when even if it's just the smallest little response, I always really appreciate it to know that they read it and they thought about it. So I make an effort to try to make sure that I do the same.
I think people who go out of their way to comment on something, it takes some effort to comment on something. It's more effort than just hitting the heart, And so somebody went out of their way to do that to you, so you could at least respond. So I always try to respond to everyone who says something, and even if it's just a thank you, they know that you read it and they know that you heard them and are acknowledging them.
Right. Do you guys have, are you on certain channels versus not? Are you on Twitter or are you on Instagram? Which do you find best as an artist to showcase your work?
I'm most heavily on Twitter, and younger folks tend to be on Twitter. And I would say of the money that I make online, I would say at least 35 to 40% of it is through Twitter. So I'll make a post about something I'm selling, and then people will flock to it and go purchase it. So, and I have the most followers on Twitter. I have 10,000 on Twitter, and it dwarfs everything else. So, but that's my favorite one.
Yeah, I was not expecting that.
I wasn't either.
Yeah.
I feel like Instagram now is really where it's at. I think especially once they added the story feature, my engagement has completely changed. I feel like I'm able to reach people in ways that I never thought possible, and it's so interesting to me how in tune people are with everything that's going on. I'm a plein air painter, so I paint in public a lot, and even though I don't see people commenting all the time, it's so crazy how well people know exactly what's going on. It's kind of cool.
I think part of it too is stylistically, because my work tends to be just kind of cartoony. It's a little bit less I would just call it way less fine art.
Sure.
It's a little bit different. It's more like cartoony illustration. So again, my audience likes Twitter, so that's where I go.
Yeah. What about you?
That's good insight, and we were honestly just looking at the promoted, how well your promoted ads have done, and I was looking at my audience, and it was 100% men, 13 to 17, mostly from Texas and California.
Interesting.
The Texas part was very big. It was very weird.
Yeah, a lot of Texans. But that's really interesting. It makes me want to get on Twitter more. Yeah.
I think it's a surprise. People don't think that there's art on Twitter. They think it's just a bunch of text and then Trump saying something stupid.
Right.
But there is genuinely a niche there for artists to share their images. There's also a lot of hashtags on Twitter that get the rounds a lot that are in different artist situations. So like there's a women making art hashtag, you know, maybe that'll blow up one day, or people of color making art and that'll blow up one day. And, you know, on Twitter, on Instagram hashtags, they show up, of course, but when something is trending, that just gets regular people to look at it too.
Yeah. I was going to say, but on Instagram you can follow hashtags. But
You can follow them on Twitter also. And you can also block them if you really hate them.
Yeah. Cool. I had another question pertaining to Twitter. So when you're on Twitter, are you only posting your art, or are you posting like thought leadership posts, or are you like curated content?
So what I do with my Twitter is I keep it business, like heavily business. I don't do any retweets because if somebody, well, I do a couple, but not a lot, because if somebody shows up to your feed, they want to see what you make. They don't want to see, you know, what your friend made. I mean, I'm sure they'd like what your friend made, but if you've got, you know, 10 tweets at the top that are all you retweeting your friend, they're not going to follow you. So I try to keep 1 out of every 3 or 4 of my posts that can be text only, but if I don't have an image to post, I really have to rethink if I even want to post it. Because my Twitter is an art Twitter, and that's where people go to see my artwork.
How often do you post about personal topics? I guess it's
I mean, I only post about a personal topic if it somehow pertains to something that I'm doing in the business. So for example, today, like I posted about how I was excited to get some piece of merchandise to my house today. I was like, oh, I'm excited to do this. I just want to show people that I'm a real human person with real emotions and not a robot asking for cash.
Yeah.
So, you know, just like, oh, I'm really excited to get, you know, these shirts in today. And you know, nobody engages with it, but it doesn't matter. Sometimes you just have to show people that, like, I'm just like you, actually,
Right.
just a little further along in my journey.
Yeah. What about you guys?
I've learned kind of the hard way, really, about the level of personal stuff, because I think it was like going on vacation. I was in Germany and I'd post a ton of stuff, and it was like, oh, wow, like I lost some followers and there was a lot of people like next to zero engagement. And as a result of that, now I have an Instagram for my travels. That we got an Airstream, so we have Ron Horn on the road, and I have a couple miniature golden retrievers that I'm obsessed with. So I post all their stuff to Crockett and Boone. So I keep those segmented out, and now try to do just a personal post, like every 10th post or something. Yeah.
And mine is primarily business and art related stuff, but I do think authenticity, like to your point, people knowing that you're a real person doing real things. I think there's like a real fine line with just being like, I don't want to be completely robotic. Here's my painting I made. So being real is important, but I think that's a little bit different than being, you know, here's what I made for dinner, or here's my dog. So
It's like being accessible, but not necessarily excessive.
right, because
I
even
like that.
that is a good point. So much so that I have a business Facebook page, but the way that Facebook has evolved over the years, I use my personal page as my business page now. And so I don't really post anything personal over there.
Yeah. It's like your wife takes care of it or something on your behalf. That's what my husband does. Anyway, so when you guys are publishing, do you use any publishing tools to like ease the pain of managing social media?
I haven't. Yeah, I've done some drafts when I have a couple posts, knowing that I'll post the next one a few days later, to spread it out a little bit, but not an actual tool.
Yeah, I mean, I see people using, you know, TweetDeck or whatever they want to use for Instagram, and it just always seemed kind of fake, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, it is more work for me to sit down and actually type out a post, you know, that goes along with something. But I just feel like, I don't know, I feel like people can tell almost. I don't know if they can, but I feel like they can.
I think there's truth in that. And I don't use any tools either. I think there's something about just being in the moment. I think that authenticity shows through.
Yeah.
Especially if you like schedule the post and then like maybe it comes out at 5 o'clock the next day, but I don't know, maybe I draw a lot of dogs and maybe somebody hates dogs, like everybody hates dogs that day, and it goes out, you know, you're like, oh God, no, go back.
That's true. You gotta pay attention to like what's going on in the world.
Right.
When you're posting. Have you run into like any challenges? Like maybe I don't want to post anymore, or like, Do you ever reach a moment where you just don't want to be on social media?
Yeah, and then I just don't for a while. I mean, sometimes you just chill out for a while. People don't normally, they're not thirsty for it every day or anything. And if you leave it for a weekend, nobody's gonna forget who you are.
Right.
If you forget it for like a year, probably. But I typically am just like, I'm just gonna take a break for just a few days.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
I think my stance has been more of like, oh, I wish I had more stuff that I was able to share right now. There's stuff that's like in the works and the client's waiting to release something, and like I can't post any of this yet. So then I'll have some lag times where it's like I got things ready but can't yet. Yeah.
Because client won't let you.
Right, it's not ready to be
It's not
shared.
released,
Yeah.
I haven't really gotten sick of it at all. But I do intentionally, I sell pretty heavily into Indianapolis market, so I'm pretty much only doing shows here. And so I'm very aware of how much I'm hitting that market in terms of shows. And so I only post a fraction of what I paint. I only post a fraction of the events I'm part of. And so I very much control how much information I'm putting out in the world. And I almost think about it as like a water faucet, and I turn it on and off. And so I'm about ready to go through a very intentional period where I'm going to get really quiet on social. So I'll post really important things, that are very, very relevant. When it happens, like if I'm on TV, I'll post that. I'm not going to. But in terms of, I'm leading up to a big show that's going to open in March 2020, and so having a couple month period where I kind of ghost and really quiet. I think once I start having that build up and lead back into that show, it's gonna sort of crescendo up and ramp into something. Whereas if I was being loud, constantly, especially hitting the same market over and over, people come to become tone deaf, I believe,
Right.
and my posts won't have as much impact. So I go through periods where I'm intentionally quiet, but I think that's strategic.
Yeah. So you won't do any teases of work in progress?
I will somewhat maybe, but leading up to the event, not even teases of the artwork, just planning things, especially the 3 weeks leading up to it, that I know I can post. And it's sometimes less about the artwork and more about come to this gigantic event I'm gonna have. And it's helped historically. I've always done that at the Harrison Center, which they have their own, social and marketing strategies that you can piggyback off of.
Yeah. So you actually you'll strategize a campaign around.
Yeah. So all year I'll proactively schedule things like speaking engagements and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I know I already have 2 speaking engagements for the month of February. And as things come up, because I know that's great content to post, where it's like, look at me, and it's not necessarily even about my art, and it's just sort of, we are individual brands, and so it's, everything to bolster that brand and bolster that credibility. And so if I can schedule something in that month, I will.
Yeah.
And that way I'm posting, but it's not, hey, here's my art.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'll schedule TV appearances and, so.
So speaking of personal brand, how do you guys stick to your personal brand? Do you ever not post something because you want to stay in line with the look or the flow of what you're posting?
I feel like everything I make at this point is pretty close to my brand, that
Yeah.
it doesn't really bother me to just post it. I mean, if I hate it 20 minutes later, you can just delete it.
Yeah.
So, but actually this year I started using the same icon, the logo that's up here, and I started using that same icon and just not changing it. I used to change it a lot, as my art improved, and I'm just like, no, don't change it, because then people are going to associate you with an image.
Right.
And then now I'm gonna print one out and actually wear one at conventions so that people can tell who I am before they even meet me, because nobody knows what my face looks like.
Yeah.
But I mean, most of the art that I make, I don't feel like it falls outside of it. And if it's something really sketchy and horrible, I mean, then I won't post it. But I would never think to, know.
What about you?
I have a problem with changing mediums and styles far too often. I get in a rut with a certain approach, and I I just want to try something else different and creative to flex those muscles. And I think that contrast of going back and forth between a couple different creative outlets is beneficial to each of those endeavors, because like if you lose some of that energy and juice for this, you come over here and do this for a little while, and it re-energizes you to go back to that original thing. And I've seen some effectiveness with that because you're hitting a whole new audience. I've tried to be very strategic with not overdoing that to where it's like now all I'm posting is mural work that I'm playing with. And then it gets like, wait, why did I follow this guy? I don't like to follow muralists. So,
Yeah.
But
do you get praise for trying a new medium?
yeah. So I think there's some engagement there as long as it's not a full 180 shift. Yeah. Stylistically, there's some similarities and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are your favorite tactics on your preferred platforms? Like, is there any tried and true method that you find work for posting and getting engagement that the fine audience members could learn from?
I mean, I don't necessarily know if there's like a true secret sauce.
Yeah,
I mean,
there is.
I used to really, especially on social, geek out on all the metrics, all the data, like, posting at 5 o'clock. And I used to really think about that stuff a lot, especially when I was trying to sell online. I don't really sell online as much as I used to, hardly at all.
Yeah.
So now for me, the secret sauce is just being real and, just trying to be who I am and as honest with my audience as possible. And so, if that means posting at 11 o'clock at night or posting at, I don't know, I don't overthink that stuff anymore.
Yeah.
I used to, and I just, in hindsight, maybe, and I don't know, maybe I'm giving terrible advice right now, but I don't know if it is a secret sauce.
I think there's truth to that, though, because within the way like algorithms are now, you can't really say that if I post at 11 p.m., everyone is going to see it, because there are chances that someone will see it 3 days from now. So like, how can you say like, if I post at this time and this day, someone's going to see it, unless you are on Twitter and then it's real time.
It's not.
It's not
The
anymore.
algorithm it is actually, I don't know how many of you have been on Twitter recently. It's actually changed you from latest tweets to home, which means it's going to show you the tweets that have the most engagement from the people you follow.
Yeah.
And they have this dumb thing where if you like a post, then it might show up on somebody else's feed as something that you liked. But why wouldn't I have just retweeted it if I wanted somebody else to see it? Yeah. Twitter is making a lot of bad decisions. But so you actually have to change it from latest tweets to home, or from home to latest tweets manually. But you have to do it like every week. It'll change it back.
That's kind of how Facebook was.
Yeah, and then how Instagram did it too. And so now they're all kind of, the algorithm just buries stuff. And sometimes you'll get, like I'll post on Twitter, and I would say the average likes I get on an art piece is 200 to 300, and then sometimes it'll go to 2,500 for no reason, and then something else you post might get 50.
Yeah.
For the similar quality of artwork, but.
Yeah.
Sometimes people just don't see it. But I don't think that there's a magic formula. I think you just have to find your voice on whatever social media you want to use, and then you need to choose the one that feels the most right to you. That's why I chose Twitter. I felt like that made sense to me, and Instagram doesn't make as much sense. It's not as accessible. I want to be accessible to people. I have my DMs open, people message me all the time. Sometimes it's dumb stuff, but you reply anyway because, maybe they're 15 and they just want to know, how do you do the thing you're doing? What program do you want to use? That kind that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think just being genuine and approachable to people is really important on social media. And if you kind of try to cheat the system and sort of say the right buzzwords or post at the right times, I think people can just tell, and then they don't want to approach you.
Yeah.
I have a way to cheat the system. Recently, it's been real effective. I'm doing something that I know I'm excited about. I'm real proud of it. I think it's going to be effective, but it might be more effective outside of the people who are directly following me. So I'll just run a quick promotion, throw $15 at it, focus the audience into people that I know are specifically a fan of that. Most recently, it was a portrait of the redhead kid from The Sandlot, and so I targeted people who are fans of The Sandlot in the United States from like 13 to 35. And it was like significantly tripling engagement and exactly what I was looking for from it. So
I guess you'd say there's no free way.
yeah, exactly. I was like, for $15, I was able to reach those extra people that I wanted to do.
If someday it will let me
What
do
about
that.
$5?
Right?
See, you can pay as much as you want.
It's true, yeah. You
Yeah.
can dial it around. But I also do a lot of pop culture stuff. And I found the most effective way is to do something pop culture related that the portrait of the person who that is sees it, reposts it, and then it's on. Yeah, it's hands down the most effective.
Yeah, doing
for me.
fan art in general. I
Yeah,
would say,
right?
like, if your
Yeah,
style
people do that.
aligns with something that you can create a fan work, then that is a good way to get kind of your foot in the door. I don't do it anymore almost at all, but it's a great way to just, like, I don't know, maybe you want to feel better about yourself that day, so you draw Batman.
It's effective.
So I'm curious if you guys have separate goals for your social media accounts. Like, what do you want to get from it as an artist?
I use social media as a tool and not a means to an end. There's no end on social media for me. It's another tool. And there's so many, because I do so many conventions, obviously everybody's coming from everywhere. And I drive on average like 4 hours to a con and, all over the country, and sometimes more, sometimes less. But, when I go to Atlanta and I sell to folks in Atlanta, those people in Atlanta still want to see my work. So social media is that avenue that I use to be like, hey, I have new stuff. Do you like stuff? Because I have stuff. But I think just reaching more people is great, because social media is the way that I make money when I'm not at a convention. Social media is the way people know that I'm open for things. So it's a screwdriver.
Yeah, along those same lines, I think it's a great tool for legitimizing your personal brand. It's like if someone sees something that they like, they're considering potentially commissioning you for something, they flip through your social channels, they're like, oh, okay, they've done this, this, and this. That's pretty legit. I like this style overall. You get a vibe for what you're going to get if you were to hire that person.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, and my answer is pretty much the same. I think as an artist, so much of what I do, my product, a painting, there's perceived value, and so bolstering that perception. I guess that's my main goal with social, is just to reinforce the fact that when people come to my shows, the prices that they see is not disconnected with my, essentially my resume.
Yeah, professionalism is super important. Yeah.
So that's my primary goal. And it used to be, 10 years ago, my primary goal was to sell directly off of it, to make a post. And then, in my heyday of selling, I would sell art in 5 minutes or less. If it wasn't sold in 5 minutes, but, it's changed so much over time that that's just not how I use it anymore.
Yeah. I'm going to switch gears
Okay.
and have you tell us the story about a few weeks ago, somebody reached out to you asking about your work.
Yeah, there was a guy who DM'd me and was saying, hey, I need the vector file for this. The client has hired me to print shirts with it. I'm like, okay, are you saying you want to license it? There was a little bit of a language barrier. And through the course of it, realized that this person had just seen it online, wanted the art on shirts that he was going to sell for himself, but wanted to use that image. And it was essentially, through the conversation, it became, hey, you can sell this to me for $30, I think is what he had in mind. He's like, I usually pay $30 for stock. He's like, or I could recreate it in a few hours if you don't want to sell it. And so I was like, so you're essentially saying you're gonna print it on shirts regardless. I was like, you should just tell your client to reach out to me and we can license it. And the conversation essentially ended with him saying, if you do a Google image search of this image, you'll see that people are printing shirts with it all over the world. And so I was like, all right,
Did you
well,
Google image search?
I did a little bit, yeah. It was being printed quite a bit. But
Crazy.
it's like, yeah. So that's one of the downfalls of posting that stuff on social, is that it's high enough resolution.
Yeah, I've never had anybody do that to me.
Nice.
But I feel very lucky in that, because there are a lot of my peers who have an even smaller following than I do frequently have their stuff taken. And especially since I work with enamel pin vendors are extremely
Yeah.
bad about it. They will keep your molds and they will make pins of your product. They might be a different color or whatever, but they keep your mold. But some of them will, in an effort to make up for that kind of storage fee of your mold, will go ahead and just sell your stuff to whoever wants to buy it. I have not seen that happen to mine, but I've seen peers who it's happened to a lot.
Yeah. It's crazy.
It happens a lot with pop culture stuff too, especially.
Pop culture stuff especially, because
it's just like asking for it.
there's a lot of people who go to the same cons that I go to who are selling clearly ripped, either actual licensed stuff or work that's from an artist that was fan art or whatever. And you can tell because it's all stylistically bananas.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, you just ripped all of that.
So is there like a way to get around that? Like, do you post low res or as low as you can on the channel?
Twitter posts low res on purpose, so that's kind of nice. But I mean, it's sort of nice but nobody can see the nice thing that I
The
made.
details.
Instagram, you can't. Can you directly save it? I don't think you can.
No, but I mean,
But you can like screenshot
yeah,
it.
if you're on a what's the monitor?
Yeah, like a huge
The
monitor.
optical monitor. Yeah.
I mean, and especially with some of my work and a lot of your work too, it's easy to trace it. You know, you could just trace the heavy line work and just make your own version of it, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, it sucks, but you know, and you can put a watermark on it if you want to, but I don't.
Yeah.
Feel like it's worth the risk usually.
With some of the gig poster things that I've done, I'll try to take a photo of it like at an angle. There's always some of that you can do.
I try not to share scans of actual media work, anymore.
Yeah.
Do people plein air paintings of your plein airs?
I don't have really any intellectual property issues online. I mean, it's hard enough to sell a painting. I mean, people are not really trying to steal my stuff.
What else do you guys want to talk about? Actually, so you use social media, YouTube primarily, as like to help you sell your things, but you're not selling through social media.
What's the difference?
It's not directly on there, but you're kind of
Sometimes it is.
promoting. Oh, really?
Yeah. It depends on what I'm selling. If I'm need a little money, extra money, I'll open up for commissions real quick, and then I'll take PayPal through, I'll invoice somebody through PayPal, but it'll be in the Twitter DMs, I will be chatting to that person or, and Telegram is another app that I use. It's sort of social media, sort of an messaging app. I don't know if anybody's familiar with it, but you can have a chat like you can on text, but you can also have something called a Telegram channel, which people can follow, and every time you're the only one that can post to it. And so every time I'm open for commission, or if I'm open for, if my store just opened, I can post there and it'll actually notify people that I have made a post on there. So through that and through Twitter, I would say I would take probably $5,000 worth of commissions a year. But most of the time I'm trying to link them to something else to purchase, like through Etsy.
Yeah. And you just do at gallery shows? Is
Pretty
that what you're
much.
saying?
And so I used to sell through Etsy. Then I put a shop on my website. And I never, especially once I moved away from Etsy, I didn't have much success selling online. And it's been interesting over the last 3 or 4 years, the harder I've made it to acquire my work, the easier it's been to sell. And it's so interesting. I don't post a fraction of what I make, and I'm selling more than I ever have. And I've sold 207 original works already this year.
Jeez.
And so I think about selling almost like as a water faucet. And so when I turn it on, like I essentially starve the market, and then I feed the market, and then I starve the market, and I feed the market. And so by making it intentionally harder, I've actually had more success. And so it's actually really difficult to figure out how to even buy my work. But even today, I've had 2 commission requests through Instagram direct message. And so what I've found, and I think part of that has to do with 10 years of building a brand in a market. So there's a lot of passive lead generation that happens. But now when people proactively reach out, I know that they're pretty committed and serious to actually getting something done. And so,
We jump through all those hoops.
yeah, it's been a really weird journey. It's interesting how this is all, sort of evolved and happened, because it's weird how, I couldn't have done any of it without social media, but as social media changed, I've, realized that social media is very important. I couldn't live without it still, but, establishing yourself in a market and having real relationships and meeting real people. Before 2012, my entire buying base was almost completely out of the state. And now, my entire buying base, I still have loyal collectors, places, outside of the state that, have been following me for 10 years now, but my primary buying base is here. And being able to shake the hands of my buyers is 10 times more stable than, social. And the reason why, not to digress into another point, but the reason why all of that shifted was, by September of 2012, I had 13,000 followers on Facebook. And when Facebook changed the algorithm EdgeRank, my interactions overnight went down. It was right around 90%, and I can't remember the exact math. And so I made an Excel spreadsheet of the previous 30 posts to the next 30 posts. And so comparing 15, then 15, then 15, then 15, and it was 90% less. And so in 2018, I've really stopped using Facebook altogether on my business page. I was just curious. I was like, I wonder if I put the current data into Excel and compare it to 10 years ago, or 6 years ago. And in 2018, my previous 15 posts on my business page was, I think it was 5% of what it was, 6 years ago. But what was so wild is, I had 13,000 followers in 2012, and in 2018, I have around 2,000 friends on my personal Facebook page. But those 2,000 friends, my 15 posts were very, very close in metrics to my 13,000 people 6 years prior on my business page. And so the way that Facebook has crippled their business pages has been super fascinating to watch over the years. And so I guess my big lesson that I learned from all of that is before September 2012, Facebook was my only lead generation source. And so when that was taken away from me, because I can't control the algorithm, I realized I'd put all my eggs in a basket, and it's a basket I couldn't control. And so that really scared me, and my business kind of tanked. And that's when I shifted my goals, and I was like, I want to become everything Indianapolis. And it's taken, 7 years, but I finally feel like I'm getting to the point where I still use social media heavily, but now my buying base is 10 times more stable than it was. And so.
And I feel like that's, I started doing conventions because I was afraid of that. I was afraid of putting all my eggs into whatever basket I was using at the time. And I was like, well, I have to go see people.
Yeah.
They have to come and see it and touch it and, and say hello, and so that they know I'm not, maybe they think I'm a really nice person, so they buy a sticker, that kind of thing, and then it just starts to snowball.
Yeah.
And to your point about the faucet as well, I do that by accident. I didn't realize what I was doing until you said it. And there's lots of times where I don't post anything, or I'm working on something that I can't show, or things like that, and then I'll post about it, and then it just goes bananas, and I'm like, oh, that's right, I haven't posted in 3 months about anything cool, sorry. But I just came out with a playing card deck that I've been working on for 8 months, but I've been very quiet because I had to work on that. And coming out and posting it, and people are like, oh, that's what you were doing, because I didn't hint at all. And so people are like, oh, that's what you were doing, that's so cool, and they get real excited. So yeah, it's always really fun when you turn the faucet back on.
Do you pay attention to analytics as well?
I don't. It makes me sad. So, if I do see that they go down, I know that should be more like a call to action. That should be like, you should do something about that. But more, I just get like, oh, that's really sad, and then I don't do anything about it. So if I try to pay a little bit less attention to that, because the important thing is my money flow. And if my money flow is faltering, then I will, of course, do something about that. But
So that's your analytics.
so that's my analytics. The cash is the analytics, but it's also the most important analytic, and then the rest of them are a little bit less important, because likes don't necessarily mean $1. You know, a like is not $1. I can't pay my rent with likes.
Yeah.
You know, I get the same amount of likes on Instagram and Twitter, but if I post the same thing to Twitter and Instagram, I'll get 1 sale on Instagram and like 80 on Twitter. So it just doesn't correlate.
Yeah. Do you pay attention to your analytics?
I do a little bit, yeah. That thing I was looking at the promoted tweets today. But yeah, I mean, the end goal is just decent engagement on everything. Yeah. So if I'm posting stuff like that too much personal thing, it's like I need to switch gears. That's not working. Yeah.
So I am curious about, you've talked about your journey with social media. Like, how did your journeys start out, and where do you want to end up?
Yeah, that's a good question. I didn't read that one on the list.
I just wrote it down.
I think I started an Instagram account when a coworker at one of my first design jobs was like, "Hey, you should get on this thing. It's I think you'd do well." Yeah, at the beginning it was all personal, and it wasn't anything special. But then, yeah, as I started to incorporate more of the illustration stuff that I was doing, seeing it grow. But the end goal is just more eyes on what I'm doing, and more legitimacy. Yeah.
I actually started on Tumblr years ago.
Yeah.
Tumblr is now dead. There's still people on it, but
Is it? Yeah, I was like.
there's
I
still
saw an
people on it,
article
but
recently
you
about
can't
it.
sell anything through there. I have a friend who actually did put all of his eggs in the Tumblr basket, and now that basket has been destroyed. But I started out on Tumblr doing very badly. I think in my late college days, I graduated in 2009. So my late college days, I had a Tumblr, and then, you know, you slowly evolve and pick up the other social medias on the way. Did really bad on Tumblr, ended up quitting doing that website just before I quit my pizza delivery job to be full-time freelance. So I just kind of like leapt with both feet in, and right when I did that, I was like, all right, time to social media, because that's what I got to do. You know, I'm full-time freelance now. I got to start doing something. So I just gave up on Tumblr, started doing Twitter. Twitter was where my audience was, primarily anyway. Instagram, I think I picked up at around the same time, but just slowly building from there.
Yeah. How long did it take you to notice a gain in followers?
It correlated with the solidity of my brand, I guess, or my style.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of trouble in college just doing things that my professors wanted me to do. So my portfolio looked like a disjointed mess, because it's like, oh, you're trying to please that professor, you're trying to please that one. And so they all look wildly different. Went through a very bad time after college, but a little bit after that, I just sat down one day and I was like, make what you want to make today. Don't think about anybody seeing it. Just make what you want to make. And I painted some like blue dogs. And so that's kind of where I'm still at, painting blue dogs. But it just, after I did that, it was like, oh, I really like looking at this, because I didn't really like to look at my stuff before that, because it just wasn't interesting to me.
Yeah.
So when I looked at this and I really enjoyed it, I was like, oh, well, other people will too, right?
Yeah.
Like if I like something.
Apparently.
Yeah. So after that, I just kept making stuff in that vein. And the more solid my work became, the more people became interested in it. It's almost like the more interested I was in creating, the more people were interested in participating with me.
Yeah. That's awesome. I feel like some part of the motivation, like part of the problem with posting is like finding the motivation to create.
Right. Yeah. Well, and a lot of the
ever-
problem, I would say, with some people is that they're creating work that they think that the people
wanna
on
see.
social media want to see.
Yeah.
And you just have to break that habit, because it's not worth it. Because
Yeah.
the audience that maybe you're gaining from making things that they want to see isn't even what you wanted to make in the first place. So
Yeah.
that audience isn't even yours. So you need to find yours, not somebody else's.
Yeah. Do you agree with that? You're like,
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think I don't want to assume anyone's familiar with my early work, but I pivoted huge in styles probably 4 or 5 years ago. I went from a very whimsical painter to a traditional landscape painter, and seeing that shift, it definitely alienated people that followed me early on. But now, today, I did a show this past March where I exhibited both styles side by side, and I don't know, it was interesting to see how that was received, and it's been interesting to see how, you know, pivoting 4 years ago, I lost some people on social, especially, but gaining a whole new audience, which is something you said earlier, has been incredibly important to the stability of my business. So now it's, in a weird way, I almost have like two products that I sell in the same market.
Yeah.
So,
Makes you feel better too when you have the audience that likes what you really like.
Yeah.
and all of that shift, I guess going back to the original point is, it was so honest to myself. I wasn't making that shift because I thought that's where the money was, or I was just sort of following my heart and not really caring what the internet or what people would respond. And I think that was really important.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Do you guys have any inspirational accounts that, not necessarily like a motivation as an artist, but motivates you to be a better social media person? Also a curveball from the questions, but
So like another account?
yeah,
Or
like that you get guidance from or helps you.
I like looking, this is weird, I like looking at my targeted Instagram ads, because my targeted Instagram ads are almost entirely merchandise, and I love making merchandise. Like, creating merchandise and product design is so fun to me. And so seeing like what some random company's shirts make, you see Instagram ads all the time. You don't scroll through them. You're just like, dumb ad, I don't want to see it. But I want to see what those other apparel companies are making.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there and I'm like scrolling through and I'm like, oh, that looks cool. I wonder if I could use that composition in my next piece, you know, that kind of thing. So I don't know. I love my targeted ads.
From a strategy perspective, there's a local painter, portrait artist that named Tom Day, who I've been super impressed with. Really young dude, and his approach and strategy to posting on social is like real effective. He does these stories throughout the day, teasing what's going to release. He releases almost every day at 9 p.m. So his audience knows, like, hey, like if I'm wanting to chime in and see the next one that's coming out this day, I know exactly when to look for it.
Yeah.
And then they're constantly reminded throughout his story. So there's consistency and regularity, and it's inspiring.
Can we expect to see that from you?
I'd love to. I get too bored and want to try something new. I need to be more consistent. Consistency always ends up lending to more natural growth.
Yeah. Like Saturday,
Right.
gonna do this thing.
Yeah.
What about you?
I would say there's a musician. His name's Mike Posner. He's a musician that I never really listened to his music before, and I don't even know why, but I think it was either sponsored or somehow came through my feed. And so I started following him, and he was walking across the country. And following that journey, I learned a lot about his music career. And I think part of why I was so drawn to him was, I've used this word a ton, but like the authenticity. Like, you could totally tell that he was making decisions for himself.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that sounds super selfish, but there's just a rawness, and he wasn't trying to commercialize or wasn't trying to, because I think one of the things that, I'm hyper aware of is as I become more established, and I am very much data driven in my success, and I don't want sort of me understanding the business side of my success to define the product and to undermine the quality and the integrity of my artistic process. And so he's someone who has like a ton of success, but you can really feel the rawness of his creative product. And to be able to balance both, it's been really fascinating to watch how he's done it.
Yeah. What is his name?
Mike Posner.
Okay.
So he got famous for maybe some terrible songs. Not terrible, but like, I don't know, just like pop culture. Stuff I wouldn't have necessarily ever listened to, but the stuff he's putting out now is pretty cool.
Yeah. Have you ever had to deal with haters?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Going all the way back like 10 years ago. I've definitely faced some challenges over the years, and I think For me personally, I mean, becoming more confident in who I am as a creator and who I am as a person. I mean, now it's, really easy to brush all that off. But I mean, initially, I mean, what we do is so personal to ourselves.
Right.
It's so hard. And I mean, I still take things I shouldn't take personally, even to this day. And my wife, Haley, I love her to death, and she's so good about keeping me in check, and not letting things, I don't know what the right word is, stew.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I've just had, just recently, since I've made that deck of playing cards, there's apparently a whole niche of people who are very, very into collecting playing cards. Oh, no. And I did not know this until I posted these playing cards. And so my typical merchandise routine is I don't tell people where I get stuff from because, I mean, what are you going to do? Go to Walmart and ask where Faded Glory's t-shirts are sewn together? It's just not something that you typically share in my circles.
Yeah.
You share them with friends, obviously, but it's not something that you like post on there. But apparently when you make cards, you always do. And this is not something that I knew. And I'm going through another company who's helping me make them. So I don't know where they're being made. And I had many, many people very angrily asking me where I'm getting them done. And it's like, oh, I hope it's this vendor. I hope it's this vendor. And I'm like, I don't know what any of you were talking about. I am so sorry. And so, you try to point them at the right place to go. I tried to point them at the other company, but I had a few people who were not very nice about that. And telling me how I was doing all this wrong and how bad I was at my job and stuff. And I'm just like, I'm just going to turn off comments right now and maybe not look at that again.
Right.
In terms of other haters, though, I've had people hate on me for using a symmetry tool, and it's just silly stuff. And, sometimes you're just like, I just won't even engage. It's very silly. You're probably 11. I don't know.
That's true.
Yeah. The only really backlash kind of commentary on stuff that I've done is when I've done something moderately political, which I usually don't put my toe into, but that's really the only time anyone's really gotten upset in comments and whatnot.
Yeah. And it didn't hurt your feelings?
Nah, I don't care. Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, well, I think, do you guys have anything else to say? I think we might turn it over to the audience and see if they have specific questions. Okay, do we have a mic? Who has questions? Hopefully. Anybody?
As an emerging artist, I have started off with Facebook, had a business account, and then I switched over to Instagram, which I loved. And I kind of dropped the Facebook part and just really went with Instagram. And I'm wondering, is it important to have both Facebook and Instagram when you post? I mean, you have those apps where you can do both in one shot. It just seems a little redundant to me. I just love Instagram so much, and I would like to build on that. And I don't know if that's a smart decision. I don't do Twitter.
Yeah. Do you use a publishing tool then? Or are you posting separate?
There for a while I was using InLight.
Yeah, I haven't heard of it.
And
I haven't heard of that.
That was a while ago.
Yeah. I was going to say, if you're using a publishing tool, maybe it's easier just to post both of them, but.
I think I think about that question actually quite a bit even today, because there's so much overlap in the audiences on both platforms for probably most of us. So it's sort of double hitting, but the way that I justify it in my mind, and I post to both, is that, in the corners of our audiences, we have people who do not follow me on Facebook, and I have people that do not follow me on Instagram. And so I want to make sure those people on the ancillary are in tune. And so what I do typically is I don't use a publishing tool, is I craft it in Instagram first, and then I just copy it. And most of the time I'm doing it right from my phone. So I just copy the text and then paste it in Facebook. Because one of the things that admittedly, I'm getting I'm getting bad at Facebook nowadays, and for so many different reasons. I don't pay nearly as much attention to it as I used to, but I know that sometimes the type of post it correlates with the type of engagement that you get. And so I wouldn't share things on Facebook. I would directly post to it. And so like, especially on my business page, if I craft a post on that page, it's going to get a different interaction than if I craft the post on my personal page and then share it to my business page. That gets almost no interaction at all. And so I just copy the text out of the Instagram and I post it to the page.
Yeah, sharing doesn't do hardly anything these
Yeah.
days. And if you feel like follow your heart. If you feel like you're neglecting Facebook by only posting to Instagram, post to Facebook. You know, you can just do the copy paste. I know you can share it from Instagram, but again, it doesn't correlate. And then if you feel like one day Facebook isn't giving you the engagement you want, you don't have to use, I don't use it. I use it if my mom wants to see something, I will post it there.
Thank you.
Oh, I was just gonna say, so my Instagram is a business account, like I just switched them over. And if you have a business page on Facebook, you can really easily share, but then at the end of that, you just said that it doesn't correlate, so I don't know if I
The
understand.
algorithms on Facebook between your business accounts, because I have a creator account, if you post it from Instagram and it posts to Facebook, it's like Facebook knows that you did that and wants to punish you for not doing it right or whatever. I don't know, but I have seen the engagement, like it's very different from when you use the actual posting in Facebook
Oh, okay,
than
I
when
got
you
you.
share it from your Instagram.
Okay,
Yeah.
I don't look at the analytics part of it at all.
Just like even just those likes are just like so different.
Yeah, I agree.
But if you're, some people might not know, you have to have that Instagram page has to be a business account, and then you have to have the Facebook business page. So if you don't have that set up, you can't do that. So I don't know
Yeah, it used to
That
be that
might
you
be-
don't, but now it yells at you. So
okay.
Oh, really?
yeah, it'll make you do it.
Okay.
So for anybody who doesn't know how to do it, it will make you.
All right, I don't really have a question. So anybody else?
I have another question. Is there a benefit to being a business account on Instagram versus not?
You can't promote if you are not
Oh,
a
okay.
business account. So promoting is good. And it's also, when you're on your bio, they have a new one. It's not just business and personal anymore, it's business personal creator. So I actually recently found that out and changed mine to creator. Somehow gained 100 more followers because I made that change. And then now instead of under my name saying business, it says artist.
That's cool.
Because you can choose, which one.
So
Yeah.
now I have a question. So besides that change of description of your job title, essentially, is there any other benefit to switching from a business to a creator?
I don't know, I was just trying to make it,
Okay.
because I'm trying to promote a post on Instagram and it won't let me agree to the non-discrimination clause, so that was just something that I tried
Ah.
in order to see, but I just left it because it said artist, and I was like, that's cool. So I don't know if maybe you show up more in tags that are art related or not.
Oh, yeah.
And it also makes me wonder, if
So
I was
tricky.
listed as a business, do I look advertising-y instead of artisty?
Sure.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah.
Ta-da!
The more you know. That's why we're here.
Yeah. So it wouldn't let you promote on business or
Nope.
creator.
I don't know what I've done.
You broke it.
I broke it. I'll figure it out.
That's why you're on Twitter.
Yes, that's why I'm on Twitter, because Instagram's broken.
Do you have a question?
Yes, so my question is relating to the different platforms and just thinking about who our audience is that will be watching this and trying to understand where they fit in. And so Mallory, you're talking about Twitter works for you, your audience is really young, skews young, and you're selling stickers and graphics and things like that that are probably a certain price point.
Correct, they are low cost.
So 25 and under, is that true?
I would say 50 and under.
50 and under,
Yeah,
okay.
I would say, in terms of the count of products that I have, half of them are over 25 and half of them are under 25. I have a huge patch that's $50, but it flies off the shelves, so.
Okay. So that is probably related to Twitter and that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
That fits.
I don't think
But-
that's not a coincidence, yeah.
Right. That totally makes sense. Now, Justin, with yours, it's a painting, it takes longer, it's not something you could
mass produce
Sure.
as multiples.
Right.
And so your price range is different. That probably relates to Instagram. And then, Aaron, you're probably somewhere in between, maybe? Can
Yeah.
you guys talk about that a little bit and how what you're doing? It's similar to artists trying to find a venue, a coffee shop versus the fanciest gallery in town. The patrons that are buying there, it really does depend on your price point
Yeah.
and what you're selling. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, for me, and that's a great question because I think something I didn't address when I was talking about all the other stuff that we've covered so far is as my price points have grown, selling online has become less and less. People don't want to impulse buy typically like a $500 to $1,000 piece without tangibly seeing it in person. And so that's part of the reason why I've even transitioned out of trying to sell online because as I'm building my brand, and I do sell a lot of art, most of my paintings I sell are in that $200 to $400 price point. And in Indianapolis, I've found a decent amount of success selling there. But on the higher end this year, I've sold paintings as much as $7,000. And when you're selling paintings, especially in that $4,000 to $7,000 range, and in bigger commercial projects, I think I'm not using social as a direct selling tool, but I am using it because a lot of people nowadays, and this doesn't apply specifically to the art world, I think this applies to the business world and probably other worlds as well. When people are checking you out, oftentimes they don't even go to your website first anymore. They check out your Instagram or your Facebook. And so I think cultivating a brand and a presence in those channels that reflect, a $7,000 price point or a $4,000 price point, I think is important. And so using it, Instagram and Facebook in particular, to try to sell directly anymore. I'm not doing that as much as, and I think about this on social, but I also think about this as the front page of my website. Most people aren't doing a super duper deep dive, but I want that instant credibility. I want them to look at it and I want whatever they see to reinforce the prices that I'm selling at.
I think to your point, I definitely, I feel like my way of posting is probably much different than yours because of the products that we're selling. I'm selling to younger people who have $25. I'm like, hey, hey, what's up, kids? This old person's gonna try and sell you a product. But, I'm trying to be, I'm trying to say this in the least horrible way possible. I'm just a little bit less professional, I should say. I'm of course always going to be as professional as possible. I'm not going to take anything lightly. My customer service is A tier, 5 stars on Etsy, and I will cry if somebody gives me 4 stars. But I still want to be hey, I made this thing, and maybe I'm displaying it in sort of a goofy way where I have one of my shoes next to it. It's something a little bit more accessible so that people in a younger bracket are oh, I can afford that.
Yeah.
I think that's just really important to think about artists that are selling paintings that are thousands of dollars, that it doesn't mean just because you're not selling on that it's not a valuable tool.
Right.
It is about building relationships, and that's what building collectors is all about. It's about building those relationships, and you have kind of evolved to be at that point, but you're still using social media to do it.
Right.
And you've done a lot of things lately. I reached out to you lately because of what you're doing. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so it's interesting. If you were to look at my Instagram right now, I would say, out of the last 12 posts, there might be one painting, but it's been interesting. So right now, my studio is currently at the Harrison Center for the Arts. I absolutely love that place, but I'm leaving, and it's one of the most bittersweet decisions I've ever made in my career. I bought a building on the Near East Side of Indianapolis, and I'll be opening up a commercial gallery in 2020. And so I bought the building in March, and as I've been, thinking about, the Harrison Center is so good. It adds so much value. Going and having a whole community of value. Now, looking forward, I'm going to be on an island, an individual. And so as I'm thinking about from a strategy standpoint, it's more important than ever as I was, thinking about March 2019 to March 2020, establishing myself as the Indianapolis person and just trying to get out there as much as possible. So part of that strategy was essentially painting within a 2-block radius of, the Soldiers and Sailors Monument pretty much every day this summer and this fall. And it's been mind-boggling how much that has positively affected my business through not even posting about it as posts on Facebook and Instagram. It's mostly sharing those experiences through stories on Instagram and sharing those stories. Oftentimes I made this little sub portion on Instagram where it's called Spotted. And so having people share that, I'm outside painting. So anyways, all of that leading up to, the last 4 weeks, kind of the last 2 months, opportunities that have happened just because of that effort in posting on social, painting at the home opener of the Colts game and getting that exposure, and then painting live on WTHR, the morning news, and then, painting right in front of, conveniently, I didn't realize this, but IBJ, the IPL building, and then getting, a photo on the front cover of IBJ. And so, the last 12 posts on Instagram, I've had this really, really fortunate run of media and press and coverage that I've been able to share through social. And because of all that increased exposure, which is interesting because it's, a lot of it has been luck, but it's sort of strategically designed luck, by just being out there all the time. It led to a super cool commission by Downtown Indy, which, they connected me to, so thank you. And so last Saturday night, I painted from the rooftop on the circle, the scene. And so all of that directly, really attributed to a really big social media push. So that was pretty cool. So.
Yep. First, I want to thank Mallory for that creator tip. I switched my Instagram already.
Nice.
Got it.
I wanted to ask all y'all because it's some of the things that y'all are saying are some of the things that I've already heard or similar to what I've been doing. But what I wanted to know was how many different platforms are y'all juggling? How did you actually break down your analytics and identify your audience that you felt was going to work most effectively for you?
Yeah, after hearing Mallory talk about the younger audience being on Twitter, I feel like I need to focus more in on that. I think Instagram became such a focus for artists because of its visual nature that we kind of got pigeonholed in there, and we're like, this is what's going to work because it's visual. And then once hashtags became realized, and we're all really focused on making sure we get the right hashtags on stuff, that's been a bulk of it. But I think we all need to keep our eyes out for those responses to who's engaging and making sure that we're where they are. Yeah.
I just tried everything and dropped what didn't work. I mean, it's, sometimes maybe if I spent more time on Facebook, I would get more engagement on there. But if I didn't pick up enough engagement fast enough, it was wasted effort. I'd rather be putting my time into creating something for an audience that seems to actually want to see it versus the audiences that don't care. That's why I don't post to Facebook. That's why I don't, what other ones are there? I don't know.
LinkedIn.
Yeah.
God. They still think I work at U-Loft. I kind of try a lot of them. That's why I dropped Tumblr also, with the engagement just totally dropped off after everybody left. And, now I juggle Twitter and Instagram. Sometimes I forget to post to Instagram. Don't tell Instagram. And then sometimes I'll use Telegram. Telegram's pretty cool, especially if you're looking to do the smaller, less expensive kind of work. Or have an Etsy shop, things like that. It's pretty cool to tell people hey, you can actually get a notification to your phone when I make something new that you can purchase, or when and you could use it if you're a fine artist too. And I paint and everything. I'm actually out of inventory right now, but I still do paint and I still sell paintings as well. And I'll post up there when I'm hey, this painting's actually for sale on my Etsy, and most of the time it doesn't last 10 minutes. So, there are people, on both ends of the spectrum of the money spectrum who are interested in, procuring artwork. And I think Telegram's an unsung hero. I think a lot of people probably haven't heard of it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I'm learning things. This is cool.
Yeah.
I don't juggle very many. Facebook, obviously Instagram. I'm on Twitter daily, but as an absorption tool. I tried Pinterest for a long time. It's such a visual platform. I thought that maybe I would be able to find an audience there. So, I guess to a point, just lots of experimentation, but I think ultimately, it probably comes down to the big two. And in terms of me trying to find an audience, I don't necessarily think of it that way anymore. I used to. The way that I think about it now, which is, I don't know if it's counterintuitive or not, is, my hope, and hope is not a strategy, but if I'm doing everything right and I'm doing my job correctly, which is making the absolute most beautiful work I possibly can, and in the pursuit of that effort, I'm hoping that the audience finds me, and so yeah.
Right on.
I hope that helped.
Just trial and error.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know you covered this some, but I'm still kind of confused between what you should do on Facebook, the business or the personal. Somebody told me put it on, get a business page and share it to your personal, but I am still confused about what I should do.
I would say the biggest difference between the two, the personal page is going to cap you at 5,000 people. So I think if you foresee garnering, a very, very big, audience, and that might not be in the short term, but in the long term, that's going to be the biggest detriment if you don't do the business page route. But the data tells me that the personal page is going to be almost 10 times more effective from an engagement standpoint. So, I found
that to be true, and that's what a lot of it.
It's hard to say, because I think if you're trying to cultivate a niche audience and you don't fear that 5,000 person cap, my suggestion would be to build it, on a personal page. But the risk in that is if your artwork blows up and all of a sudden you have 10,000 more people that want to follow you, you unfortunately put your eggs in that personal basket and you can't grow it, and then you have to start new. So it's, I don't know.
What do you think about the sharing? Putting on the business and sharing to the
Well,
personal, or is that
so
twice?
I don't have the
I know you said
data
not between
to.
platforms, but if you're.
I think Facebook penalizes.
Yeah, Facebook, the algorithm seems to penalize sharing generally.
Yeah, I don't have hard math on that, but my
It just
instinct says
seems like it.
Yeah.
And I've done it before. I used to have a professional page that I would share to my personal, but then nobody on my personal would see it. Like, for example, I would say on Facebook, most of the people who are on there are going to be my family. But I want them to see what I'm doing. I want to show them, like, hey, I'm still making stuff. Like, remember when I was coloring books? Still doing it. But posting it on personal, they see it. But when I used to post on the professional, even if they followed it, they'd never see it.
Yeah.
So if, and I don't know what that is about the business page in general, but I think if you're doing Facebook and you have a personal page and a professional page, you could probably just copy paste to both of them. And if somebody who follows you on your personal follows your business too and they see it twice, cool, then they saw your artwork twice. They're not going to be mad about it. Yeah, and I think just sort of, even if you copy paste, which is the same thing as sharing it basically, Facebook doesn't know that.
Yeah.
It doesn't take your post and do the same thing with it.
Right.
And then still put it on Instagram.
And then
So
you can still put it on
share
Instagram.
they do all three.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say using the share tools is just never as good.
But it's so interesting because I still, I think, have 11,800 followers on my Facebook page. And we were looking at it just right before all of this happened. I think I've only made 2 posts on there this year. I never use it. It's so interesting how Facebook has rendered that number kind of useless. And it's weird because in the early days, it helped so much with my perception as an artist to get sponsorships and ambassadorships. but it's to me, personally, I don't think about it anymore. I don't invest any money or time into it anymore. And maybe someday if Facebook changes their algorithm back to where all that becomes accessible for free, I'll hugely regret that decision, but I just don't see that happening.
You can always go back.
I mean, you could go back.
Yeah,
So.
and, oh shoot, never mind. I forgot what I was gonna say.
I have a question. I don't put my art on Pinterest, but I just discovered that somebody's been putting my art on Pinterest. So is there anything you can do? It's like,
I mean,
I have collector trees, and all of a sudden my trees have shown up on Pinterest, and I'm,
you
like,
can.
how did that happen?
Associated with the work? Or is it just somebody else?
One of them has my name, and the other doesn't.
You can try to get the post taken down.
Yeah.
I would say 80% of the work that I have made in the last 2 years is up on Pinterest. And half the time it's not credited.
I didn't even know they could do that one.
Yeah.
You can post whatever image you want on Pinterest, unfortunately. And Pinterest is for, it's for people who don't really care who made the art. I know that that's mean, but it's true. You know, people have just a Pinterest board. They're like, I like all this stuff, but they don't care who made it. And they're never gonna be your collector either. You know, they're not, somebody who wants to seek you out will take that image and try to reverse image search it to find you. So, you know, if somebody sees it on Pinterest and likes it enough.
Is there a way you can prevent that? Like my collectors who
Not
got these
really.
trees,
I mean, you can.
They aren't gonna like knowing the trees.
You can report
it.
I've tried. They don't normally do much about it.
I've had things that I've pinned, removed, and it tells you
Oh, really?
why. Yeah.
Because I've had things that I've tried to report and they just stay up there. So I don't know. Maybe I'm
Yeah.
reporting it wrong or
It's
something.
happened twice, so.
I have received emails before that says we removed your pin because it was
Of the copyright
copyrighted
holder or whatever.
something.
Yeah.
So,
But I don't know if it's, maybe it's a proof
Yeah.
thing.
They can't know. So.
exactly.
I
yeah.
stopped reporting it after I tried the first two and nothing happened. So I
Yeah.
was just like, just let them have it. It's fine.
Watermarks.
If you put a watermark on it though, then you're at least credited. So if your signature is in a place that they can't crop it out, or if it's watermarked, it may still be posted anyway, but at least you're credited. They posted it without credit, which sucks. Reposting always sucks, but it's nice to at least have your name on it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, because I would say also with Pinterest is people use it as inspiration. They're not using it to sell a product. So if they have your image on there, it's not like they're trying to sell that, right? So
It's the danger of somebody else who does want to sell
See
it,
it.
seeing it
Yeah.
on Pinterest. That's the problem, not the
Yeah.
person who pinned it. Yeah. So I know where the fear is coming from, and it's totally like, if you see it, go ahead and report it.
Yeah.
Like, please do, because people need to stop doing it.
yeah, it's valid.
So I have one more question.
Yeah.
I want to talk about sales. So that is the bottom line. That's why we're all here trying to do this, right? So Justin, you've talked about moving on from online sales to gallery only and commissions. And so we know you're using it for building your brand and relationships, things like that.
Yeah.
And then Mallory and Aaron, what are the platforms that you use for sales? And you talk about Twitter, and yeah, that's where you get the connections for the sales, but where do the sales happen? Is that Etsy? I mean,
I use
that's
Etsy, yeah.
that's kind of been the standard for a while now. I was just curious because there's so many of those platforms. Which ones are the best? Which ones do you get the best value from for artists that do sell things that are in that price range that it would make sense to use some of those platforms?
I think it depends on how many things you're selling, because I sell a lot of small things. So I have a ton of addresses that come through my little label printer. So I've gone through a lot of different selling platforms. I initially used, not Shopify, but it's another one.
Big Cartel?
Nope.
No?
Another one?
Society 6.
Nope. I would actually recommend against anybody who is here or watching this, recommend against using Redbubble, Society 6, any of those direct to garment kind of printers. They don't make the best quality products and they don't make your brand look good. So if you can at all help it, try to control your your merchandising. So if you are making a painting, but you do want to sell it as a t-shirt or whatever it may be, I just would really recommend against that. Some of their products are okay. Look up some reviews first. None of their t-shirts are okay. So don't sell t-shirts on those things. But I use Etsy now. Their fees are a little bit higher, but their marketplace is great. I didn't used to get any marketplace sales on the other site that I used. They had a marketplace, but I didn't get any sales from it. And then they would charge me more to get a marketplace sale, which I didn't like. And then they would also charge my customers a fee for using the website, which I also didn't like. I'd rather pay it and then deal with it on my end than have my customer pay an extra $2 for a product. So I think Etsy right now has a 5% commission on everything that you sell. So everything that I sell online has to be a little bit more than I sell it at my table. But I do really like it. It's extremely easy to use. The analytics are great. Your sales are great. Like when people look at your product, it counts it as a view. It shows you how many people have a product in their cart that's from your shop. You can actually send out emails from Etsy to the people that have a product in your cart and offer them like a coupon or whatever. You know, it just has a whole lot of really cool tools. And since moving to Etsy, I would say that my online sales have doubled. Not because of Etsy specifically, but it has helped a lot.
Yeah, I have a store on my website, but I pay enough for it that sales typically cover the cost of it. It's more of just an access tool. I do have an Etsy page as well, but I sell something every like 3 months, but I don't keep up with it. But I've utilized some other, in terms of commissions, I've utilized some other sites that I've found to be pretty effective. There's one called Hire an Illustrator that is a UK-based company that for $300, I think that's where they're at right now. You get a year of their service and they will post your images on social for you. They'll run like newsletters and highlight the recent stuff that you've done. You get commissions from all over the world. Some really, really interesting clients have come through those. I've done some other ones like this Directory of Illustration, which costs more like $3,000 for a year, and you get lost in the mix because there's so many people on it. So it's been a little trial and error trying to find those kind of things. I was really focused on product and merchandise and physical sales a lot more in the past, but have found commissions to be much more fulfilling and financially beneficial for me personally.
I do still get personal commissions from time to time, but I will actually invoice people personally through PayPal. Invoicing that's a really good tip. Like, don't just give people your PayPal email. Like if that's, the way that you do commission work online, always invoice them so that you have everything written out, and be sure that you have your rights listed in the terms and conditions. Make sure that they don't have printing rights because, some people don't think about that. But if you have an invoice that's like, by paying this, you have signed this contract, you can come back and say, hey, you can't do that. You actually said that, that you understand this. And so that's the other way I would take online money.
Smart.
It's really important.
Yeah.
Is that it? Okay, so I think we're done. We had great questions tonight, and I'm so glad you guys came out brave the cold. Your expertise is really appreciated. And hope to see you on social.
Thank you.